The Dreamer's Curse. A Sleeping Beauty retelling set in the City of Wishes world. Written by Rachel Morgan. Digitally narrated. All Cress wanted for her 16th birthday was to discover she'd been cursed at birth and would die the day she turned 16. Wait. No. She definitely had not included death on her wish list. I'm sorry? She frowned across the dinner table at her parents. Did you just say I'm going to die tomorrow? Mom looked at Dad as she took a deep breath, but no words left her tongue. The only sound in the tastefully decorated penthouse dining room was the jazz music playing softly in the background. Eventually, Mom looked at Cress again.
Well,
Her hand fluttered near her throat, gold bangles clinking against one another as they slid down her arm.
You may not be aware of this, Cress, but we struggle to,
Dad scratched the tip of one pointed ear. He cleared his throat, then sat a little straighter and snapped his fingers to turn the music off.
fall pregnant. We saw many doctors. We tried all the potions and concoctions Grammy came up with. We scoured the wish catalog, hoping to find something that would help. We even sent in a request to the Mages Guild, but apparently not even a third-tier wish can fix infertility.
So, we summoned the Godmother.
The Godmother? Cress couldn't imagine her parents, highly regarded members of Fae society, in the same sentence as the Godmother, let alone the same room. The Godmother was Fae too, but that wasn't nearly enough to make up for her illicit activities. According to the stories, she'd been a member of the Mages Guild once, more talented at wish magic than anyone before or since. She had escaped the guild, taking the knowledge of wish magic with her instead of surrendering it, as law dictated for anyone who wanted to cut ties with the guild. The manufacture and trade of wishes was tightly regulated. No one operating outside the Mages Guild and its registered network of sellers was allowed to deal in wishes. But the Godmother did. And unlike other black market dealers, her wishes were flawless. The only catch? Her prices were steep, and they were not the kind that money or even essence, the Fae's magic, could pay.
Yes, the Godmother. We told her we wished for a child. She said this was a wish she could grant.
But the price?
She would not say. We had to agree to the bargain first. She would then return to us on the day of your birth and inform us of the price she'd decided upon.
Well? Cress tucked a lock of peacock blue hair behind one ear before folding her arms. Like her parents, she was dark-skinned, dark-eyed, and dark-haired. It was boring in her opinion. She wanted more color in her life, and the easiest feature to change with a charm was her hair. I have to say, Mom, that sounds like the worst possible deal you could ever have agreed to.
I don't expect you to understand now, Cressida, but you will one day when...
Mom cut herself off, sucking in a shuddery breath. It seemed she'd momentarily forgotten that there would be no one day for Cress.
A life for a life. You were barely hours old when the Godmother appeared and told us the price. Your mother and I had to choose which of the two of us would die.
What? That's awful even for the Godmother. What's the point in granting a life if you're only going to take another one away?
Great magic requires a great price. That's what the Godmother said. I would never choose your mother's death, so of course I offered my own life. But your mom refused to let me, saying that she would die instead. I argued, reminding her that you would need a mother more than a father, and she argued right back, saying that you would always need both of us. We couldn't come to an agreement, and that was the worst mistake we could have made.
The Godmother chose for us. And she chose... you.
Like the lunatic that she is. Of course. Grant a life and then take it away. That makes total sense. Cress shoved her chair back and stalked toward the impressive glass doors that led to the balcony. With lips shaking and arms wrapped tightly around her chest, as if that might calm the racing of her heart, she watched the vibrant sunset colors light up the sky above Vale City. Was this the last she would ever see of the sun? Would she truly be dead by the time it rose tomorrow? So I'm simply going to... die?
Well, The Godmother didn't mention any specifics. She only said that you would die the day you turned 16.
Cress inhaled deeply. Her mind raced through all the things she would never do, never see, never be. There was the winter dance in 3 weeks, and all the friends she would never hang out with again, including the new girl Emma she hadn't told her parents about, because Emma was human, and Cress's parents wouldn't approve of that. She would never get to master all the potions and charms she wanted to learn about, or one day take over Grammy's apothecary, or... Cress turned to face her parents. Does Grammy know?
Yes.
Cress felt a stab of betrayal. Grammy was her person, the only one who truly understood her endless fascination with potions and her tendency to say exactly what was on her mind and her somewhat unorthodox opinion of the other high races, vampires, shifters, and humans. Grammy knew about the friendship Cress had already formed with Emma, and she didn't care that Emma was human. She wouldn't have cared if Emma was shifter or vampire either. Like Cress, Grammy knew a person's worth extended beyond his or her race. Cress thought she and Grammy shared everything. Apparently, she'd been wrong.
For most of your life, Grammy has been working to find some potion or charm that will release you from this curse, but nothing has worked so far.
How do you know? If I'm not yet 16, then perhaps something she's done has...
You still have the mark of the curse.
Mom rose from her chair and moved to Cress's side.
It's here, on your right wrist. A freckle shaped like a diamond. It appeared when the Godmother cursed you and has never gone away.
Cress swallowed, staring at the freckle with growing dread. Where is Grammy? Why isn't she here? I can't die without saying goodbye to her.
She's going to meet us at the Mages Guild. We're going there this evening after dinner. Or now, I suppose, since I doubt any of us can stomach a single mouthful right now.
The Mages Guild? Cress pictured the grand institution located at the end of a winding avenue of oak trees just outside Vale City. Surrounded by solid walls and grounds almost as extensive as Belmont Palace, home to the country's Fey royal family. It wasn't the most accessible of places. I don't think they allow people to just walk in there, Mom. Not even in the middle of the day, let alone after hours.
I don't care. Someone there has to help us. We'll pay anything. We may not be the wealthiest family in the city, not like those living in the Arabesque hills, but we are most certainly high society, and they will help us.
Cress would have rolled her eyes if the situation wasn't so serious. In her opinion, Mom placed far too much value on the concept of high society.
Apparently there is no wish, no potion, no essence, no magic of any sort that can save you from this curse. But that doesn't mean magic can't bring you back to life. When you die, the Mages Guild is the best place we can possibly be. They are the most skilled, the most powerful.
Not as powerful as the Godmother. Why not summon her again and ask to change the terms of the deal?
Do you think we haven't tried that?
Dad was standing now too, striding toward Cress. He took her hand, his grip almost painful, it was so tight.
I would do anything, to save my little girl. Both your mother and I have tried many times to summon the Godmother again. But either she hasn't received our summons, or she chooses to ignore us.
The last thing she said to us was that she does not deal a second time with those who refuse to pay the price of a wish. It would seem she was telling the truth. We have to fix this ourselves. Go and get ready. We're leaving in 20 minutes.
Cress shut her bedroom door and launched herself onto her 4-poster bed. She pulled her laptop closer and opened it. Her parents might believe her only hope lay with the Mages Guild, but she refused to leave her future in the hands of a bunch of entitled Fae who would probably get her arrested before they'd help her. Her future belonged to her, and she needed to take charge of it. Her fingers paused over the laptop keys. She bit her lip. What she was about to do was stupid, a huge risk. But apparently this was her last night alive. So what did she have to lose? It took only a single search for Cress to find what she was looking for, the Godmother's symbol. Though she'd seen it before, she needed a reminder. Cress clicked on the first video result, then watched as someone, either human or shifter, based on his non-pointed ears, painted the symbol onto a stop sign with a can of spray paint. She paused the video and peered closer. She watched it a second time, then a third. Then she climbed off her bed and hurried to the vanity. Her fingers searched through the items scattered across the top until they landed on a tube of lipstick the same shade of blue as her hair. That would work. She pulled the lid off and positioned the tip against the vanity mirror. After a final glance over her shoulder at the frozen image on the laptop screen, Cress drew the symbol onto the glass surface. She pulled her hand back and stared at it, slowly releasing her breath. The summoning required no words. Cress simply had to wait and hope the Godmother had received. Cress spun around. There, leaning elegantly against her bedroom window, was a woman. Cress blinked, taking in the Godmother with one sweep of her gaze. From her short, perfectly styled white hair down her slender frame to the points of her impossibly high heels, she was the last thing Cress had expected.
Well, what is it?
The Godmother shifted her purse from one flawless alabaster hand to the other and checked her watch.
I'm due at an art auction in precisely 8.5 minutes. You're lucky I decided to deal with you myself instead of sending someone in my place.
Oh. Cress swallowed past the dryness in her throat and lifted her chin. My parents made a wish before I was born that affects me. They refused to pay the price, and you decided I should die when I turn 16. That's tomorrow. The Godmother made a get-to-the-point motion with her hand.
You're not telling me anything I don't already know, Cressida.
Cress blinked at the Godmother's use of her name. Right. Well, I don't want to die. I'd like to negotiate with you.
I don't negotiate.
But I'm not the one who made the wish and then couldn't pay the price. Why should I be the one to die?
Life isn't fair, Cress.
It doesn't have to be fair. You can make me pay some other price even though I didn't bring any of this about. Just make it something that isn't death. Please. The Godmother checked her watch again and sighed.
Fine. You can exchange one curse for another. Instead of death, you can have...
Her gaze moved to the vase of white roses sitting on Cress's windowsill. She slid one from the vase and lifted it to her nose.
An eternal slumber, which can be ended with true love's first kiss. That's always a fun one.
She returned the rose to its vase and smiled.
See? I'm not completely evil.
Are you kidding? That's definitely evil. You know I've planned to never fall in love.
I know nothing of the sort.
You seem to know everything else. And even if I was fine with the idea of being tied to some guy for the rest of my life, how am I supposed to find him while I'm asleep? The Godmother shrugged, somehow managing to make the movement seem refined.
That isn't my concern. You've got... roughly 7 hours to come up with a plan.
Cress's eyes darted to the small clock beside her bed. Midnight is less than 5 hours away.
You were born just after 2 a.m. You're not 16 until the same time tomorrow. Now, do you accept the new terms?
Cress shut her eyes, her scrambled thoughts tumbling over one another.
5, 4, 3.
Yes. An eternal sleep with the remote possibility of waking up was better than death, right? Or was it? Now that Cress thought about it, eternity was very, well, eternal.
Wonderful. Sweet dreams, Cressida.
Wait, but the Godmother snapped her fingers and vanished. There must be something here. Cress's fingers hovered inches from the dozens of bottles, boxes, and pouches lining the shelves of Apollo's apothecary. Something. She and Grammy were searching for a potion or charm that might help Cress, either before or after she fell into an eternal slumber. Dad was sitting at the computer behind the shop's counter, scrolling through the wish catalog to see if he could find anything useful. Mom was hovering nearby, wringing her hands and being generally unhelpful.
Nothing this side. I'll check the next aisle.
Grammy fluttered past Cress in her purple and gold caftan dress.
I still can't believe you summoned her. You should have told us what you were planning. We could have...
What, Mom? Stood in the room with me while I summoned her? She probably would have ignored me then. You told me she's ignored you every other time you tried to summon her.
We could have tried to negotiate something better than a cursed eternal sleep.
She doesn't negotiate. Cress's eyes continued to slide across the many labels on the shelf in front of her. She hadn't mentioned the part about true love's first kiss ending the cursed sleep. There was no point. Love wasn't something she was cut out for. She'd seen the way Mom couldn't do anything without first conferring with Dad, and she'd never wanted to be bound to someone in that way. She had always wanted to be like Grammy, strong and independent. If Cress could change her beliefs in order to escape a curse that was possibly worse than death, she would. But she figured it was too late now to alter something so fundamental about herself.
We don't even know what we're looking for here. We're wasting time. We should be at the Mages Guild, explaining what's happened. Someone there will help us.
More likely they'll get us arrested. Cress stepped around the row of shelves and into the next aisle where Grammy had just removed something from a shelf. She turned to show Cress the 3 bottles in her hand.
These are all charms designed to keep one awake, popular among students at exam time, but I doubt any are powerful enough to counter an enchanted sleep brought on by the Godmother's magic. And even if they are, the effects won't last longer than a day at most.
Well, we'll try them anyway.
Thanks, Grammy. Cress stepped past her grandmother and aimed for the door with the staff-only sign that led to the workshop and storerooms. There were more supplies back there, and Cress needed to get away from her mother's anxiety. She hurried into the workshop, ignoring the benches laden with open flasks, scattered powders, and crushed herbs, and trying not to breathe in too much of the green smoke that drifted near the ceiling. How Grammy didn't get herself blown up in here on a daily basis was a mystery to Cress. She moved to the only shelf that held Grammy's completed products. Her eyes scanned the bottles, taking in each label in under a second before sliding to the next. The weight on her shoulders grew heavier. Her hope began to fade. There was nothing here that could... Dream Traveler. Cress's eyes caught on the tiny label. In the next instant, she snatched the glass bottle from the shelf and raced back out to the store. Grammy, what's this? Grammy's caftan rippled around her as she turned. She eyed the bottle in Cress's hand with a frown.
Did you get that from my workshop?
Yes? Grammy glanced over her shoulder. Mom was with Dad now. They were bent together over the computer, their heads almost touching.
That's an experimental potion. It hasn't been through the guild approval process yet. I decided not to submit it because, well, I don't think they're going to like it.
Meaning it probably violated at least one law. Not that that bothered Cress. What exactly does it do? Grammy pressed her lips together before answering.
It will give you the ability to travel into other people's dreams and communicate with them.
Indeed. That sounded like something the Mages Guild would refuse to approve. It also sounded like something that would be useful to a person stuck inside an eternal sleep. Does it work? Grammy paused before answering.
It does.
Do you think I should...
Cress, we need to go. We've wasted enough time already. Potions can't help you now, and we can't possibly look through the entire wish catalog before you turn 16.
Mom moved to Cress's side and steered her away from Grammy and toward the apothecary's front door.
We'll be better off at the Mages Guild. Someone there will know what to do about an eternal sleep.
Instead of arguing, Cress slipped the tiny bottle of Dream Traveler into her back pocket. She would drink it when Mom wasn't looking. She would also drink the stay-awake potions and charms, just in case they were strong enough to combat the Godmother's magic for a few hours and keep her awake long enough for someone at the guild to help her. Unfortunately, just as Cress had feared, no one at the Mages Guild seemed interested in the plight of a single Fae girl whose parents had been foolish enough to make a deal with the Godmother. In fact, the man on the other side of the tall metal gates threatened to call the police at the mere mention of the Godmother's name. After various threats, a few embarrassing attempts at bribery, and some name-dropping of several celebrity Fae, old friends of Grammy's, they finally made it through the gates, up the long driveway and into a reception area. But hours later, they hadn't made it any further than that, and Cress's parents were still arguing with a tired-looking woman who appeared to be wearing a nightgown beneath her partially buttoned-up dress. As the hands of the giant clock behind the reception desk passed 2 a.m., an irresistible tiredness stole its way through Cress's body. Mom and Dad didn't seem to notice. Dad jabbed a finger at the air as he shouted something. Mom carried on sniffling. Cress tried to stand, tried to call out, but she was so darn tired. Her limbs were liquid, her eyelids were lead. She slid down in her chair, Grammy holding her hand as the curse of eternal sleep tugged her into darkness. An unknown amount of time later. Traveling through dreams was like wandering through a house where every door led to a new life. A girl standing naked on a stage in front of a hall full of school children. A woman wrapping a scarf of lettuce leaves around her neck in a shopping mall fitting room. An overgrown forest of prehistoric creatures seen through binoculars. A human-turned-wolf shifter trying to outrun the rising moon and his first change. Most dreams were boring, albeit a bit odd. Some dreams were disturbing. Even if Cress couldn't see through the shadows to exactly what caused her heart to seize, she could hear slithering or a scream or the grunts of a struggle. She could feel icy breath on her neck or sense invisible shackles around her ankles. Those were the dreams she dove away from, willing herself to flee into someone else's head as quickly as possible. To a certain extent, she could control whose dreamscape she entered. She could think of someone, Grammy or Mom or one of her friends, and open a door into that person's dreams. Mostly, though, she wandered through worlds that belonged to people she didn't know, seeing indistinct faces and hearing snatches of conversation. In the beginning, she'd explained her story to anyone who would listen. She'd asked each dreamer if they knew of a way to save her from an eternal enchanted sleep. Most seemed to believe her story. But of course, that was the way it was with dreams. You believed them when you were in them. But there were others. Those who were shifter, vampire, or human, not fae, who tried to fight her off, screaming about how they wanted nothing to do with her cruel, selfish kind. No matter what kind of response Cress received, no one ever seemed to remember her after they woke up. If she found her way back into the dreams of someone she'd already met, she had to explain everything all over again. It was the same with Grammy and Mom and Dad. They knew as soon as they saw her in a dream that she had traveled there, but they couldn't remember any previous dream conversations they'd had with her. After a while, she'd stopped asking if anyone could help her. When Cress wasn't traveling through someone else's dreams, she was stuck inside her own. Stocking shelves at the apothecary, rushing to finish a homework assignment on her laptop, trying out for the cheerleading squad at school, or that one specific recurring nightmare involving the Godmother, a dragon, and a tower of thorns. How many dreams had she traveled through now? How many people's heads had she lived inside? How long had she been asleep? The trouble with dreams was that time was a meaningless concept. It disappeared like water through Cress's fingers when she tried to hold on to it. Sometimes it seemed she'd been asleep for only minutes. At other times, it felt like years. Perhaps there really was no way out of this dream world. Perhaps she should never have wished to change her curse. Cress was in the nightmare again. The one with the Godmother, a dragon, and a tower of thorns. The tower was actually the skyscraper Cress lived in, wrapped in ropey, thorny vines. The dream always began with her about halfway up the outside of the building, clinging to the vines as she tried to find the next handhold. With magical telescopic dream vision, she could see the Godmother standing at the very top, laughing down at her. Cress never made it to the top, but some urgent force always prompted her to try. Maybe this time would be different. Maybe this time she would finally make it into her bedroom. She would find herself asleep on the bed, and she would shake herself awake. This nightmare, this never-ending dream world, would be over. A whoosh warned Cress that the dragon was close. Giant wings beat the wind at her back. Heat burned her ankles. She yelped and hoisted herself a little higher, gasping as thorns bit into her palm. The dragon swooped past again. Hot breath curled against Cress's neck. She shuddered and pulled her body closer to the vines. Peering through the leaves, her eyes found the reflective surface of a window, and she saw the dragon right behind her. Her heart almost stopped. Her dream vision zoomed in on the dragon's eyes. Solid rings of orange flame surrounded narrow, vertical pupils. They were eyes that burned. "Don't stop moving," Cress instructed herself, forcing her gaze away from the dragons. Though she was almost paralyzed by terror, she managed to pull her body upward. She had to keep going. That was the only way the nightmare would end. She would reach her window, raise her fist to bang against the glass, and the Godmother would stretch down and grab her hand. Then she would tug Cress free from her thorny perch and let go. Cress would fall, and land in a new dream. That was the way it always ended. A roar startled her. She froze. There wasn't supposed to be a roar in this dream. The dragon never made a sound. Clinging tightly to the vines, Cress swiveled to look behind her. 2 dragons. 2. Both sweeping low over the glimmering structures of Vale City before soaring back up toward Cress. One was the orange-gold dragon that always chased her. The other was black and green. Cress turned back to the vines, looked up, and saw that somehow she was closer to the top than she'd ever been before. This was definitely a different nightmare. That must surely mean it would have a different ending. She pulled herself a little higher, then higher still.
Hey!
Cress looked up, though she already knew that the voice didn't belong to the Godmother. Where the mysterious Fey woman had been, there was now a young man brandishing a computer keyboard like a sword in the direction of the dragons.
Come and get me!
Cress looked behind her. There was only one dragon now. Gone was the orange-gold one she knew and feared. And the other one? Cress realized with a jolt that it wasn't a real dragon after all. It was the shape of a dragon, made up of rows upon rows of bright green computer code. The code dragon flew at the young man. With a cry, he swiped his keyboard at it, sending tiny green numbers and letters scattering through the air. He swung the keyboard back and forth, again and again, until the code dragon was gone and numbers and letters rained down toward the streets below. A hand gripped Cress's. She looked up again. She was now at the very top of the building, though she couldn't remember climbing any further. The young man pulled her all the way up. She took a moment to catch her balance before noticing all of a sudden that the Godmother was standing behind him. She gave Cress a twisted smile.
Finally.
Then in a blink, she was gone. "Thank you." Cress focused on her rescuer. As was the way with all her dreams, she couldn't fully see his face. Whenever she tried to look directly at him, it was as if her gaze slid off to the side. Or perhaps she was looking directly at him, but somehow immediately forgetting what he looked like. "Is this your dream?"
Oh, I'm not sure. I thought it was your dream, though the computer-coded dragon would suggest otherwise.
Did you buy a dream traveler potion by any chance? From Apollo's apothecary, perhaps?
I think I made one. I did make one. I just wasn't sure if it would work. I experiment with all sorts of charms and concoctions. Drives my parents crazy. They think I'm going to accidentally give myself a third arm or turn myself into a frog or something.
And is that a computer keyboard?
Oh, yes.
He attempted to hide the keyboard behind his back, but it was larger than a real-life one and stuck out a little on either side.
I, also like to code. Seems my nerdy pastime followed me into my dream. Or your dream. Or whoever's dream this is. You have to admit, though, it made quick work of that dragon.
He raised the keyboard above his head and let out a nervous chuckle.
Nerds rule!
Cress couldn't help it. A loud laugh burst from her lips. In all the dreams she'd experienced, no one else had ever felt as real as this guy. "What's your name?"
Bren.
He thrust the keyboard toward her.
Oh, sorry.
He lowered the keyboard and extended his empty hand. Cress took it, giving it a firm shake. I'm Cress. It's very nice to meet you. So, where do you live? I'm in Vale City, in Astronerica. As Cress spoke, the remnants of her nightmare melted away. The twisted, thorny vines rose around her to form trees. A cool breeze drifted over her arms, and the sound of water tumbling over pebbles reached her ears. A bench sat behind Bren, and not too far beyond that, a familiar bridge curved over a stream. Cress recognized the tranquil scene as part of the Vale City Botanical Gardens.
Oh, yes, Vale City. I'm not too far from you. A few hours' drive, I think. You can probably tell I'm not originally from your part of the world, but my dad moved for work recently. What are the chances of me ending up inside the dream of someone I'm close enough to meet up with in real life? If you think about it, we should be able to travel through the dreams of anyone, anywhere in the world. Is this merely a coincidence? Although now that I think about it, there's something that feels familiar about your dream. As if I've been here before. Well, not here specifically. Maybe the previous scene? I don't know. It just feels familiar.
Cress bit her lip to keep from laughing again. You talk a lot, Bren.
Right, I know. I'm sorry.
Oh, don't apologize, I like it. Other dreamers don't generally talk much. You know, people who are just having a normal sleep and a normal dream, not magically traveling into dreams the way you and I are doing. Sometimes they don't even talk in full sentences. It can be difficult to have a conversation that makes sense.
How very frustrating.
Yes, especially since, well, I've been here a very long time. Cress hesitated. It had been so long since she'd shared her story with anyone. She'd decided years ago, had it been years, or was it only months or weeks, that there was no point. But Bren was the first person who might actually remember what she told him. So she took a breath and began her tale.
Oh, hello. It's you again.
Cress turned and found Bren behind her. She had just stepped into a beach dreamscape where a laptop sat on the sand, frothy white water washing over it before receding. Hi. Cress smiled as she faced him. He was tall and tall. That was pretty much all she could tell in a dream world where physical details were impossible to pin down. Bren was warmth, curiosity, unexpected bursts of laughter, the scent of freshly brewed coffee.
You know I still haven't taken that potion again. Seems the effects are, well, slightly longer lasting than I expected.
Not wild about traveling through dreams forever?
After you sold the idea so well. Slightly less wild than I was while crafting the dream travelling concoction in the first place. Although if you are always here, it certainly won't be that bad. Oh, is that my laptop? I've been worrying about it all day. A friendly classmate of mine managed to fit it into a toilet bowl at school. Quite impressive, actually. The size of the toilet bowl, I mean. Anyway, I haven't attempted to switch the poor drenched thing on yet. Figured I'd subject it to one of my mother's hairdryer charms first.
Friendly classmate? Sounds like a bit of an arse to me.
Yes, well, unfortunately these things happen when you're a...
Nerd?
Yes. A nerd in a school full of jocks. Let's call it that.
Okay, so nerd wasn't what he'd been planning to say. Cress was about to ask what he really meant, but Bren took 2 steps toward the laptop and disappeared. Cress kicked the water as it rippled over her feet and then vanished in the same way Bren had. Dreams were so annoyingly short sometimes. Mom! Cress called. Mom! Mom! Her mother looked up. She was sitting on Cress's bed, one of Cress's journals in her hand. Everything about her was out of focus except for her large, tear-filled eyes. This was Cress's dream, not Mom's dream, which meant Cress wasn't communicating with her real mother. Thank goodness. I'm so sorry, Mom. The part where I said I never want to be like you, I just meant, it seems like you love Dad too much. Like you're half a person when you're not with him. And I want to be whole, individual. I don't want love to steal part of my identity.
Love doesn't do that, Cress. Not if it's the right kind of love. I thought I told you this already, but perhaps you don't remember. I was broken. Love put me back together.
I think that's a line you got from a cheesy love song, Mom. Actually, since this is my dream, I think that's a line my subconscious got from a cheesy love song.
Or maybe you're remembering something I told you long ago.
Either way, I still don't want love stealing anything from me.
I think you have it backwards, honey. Love doesn't take, it gives.
Cress.
Cress whipped around and saw Bren. How much had he heard? Not that it mattered. He wouldn't remember any of it when he woke up. She spun away and fled the dream.
It's a cloak made of daylight.
Bren stood up from the library table they were sitting at and shook the wrinkles from the silvery piece of fabric. Then he drew it around his shoulders and raised the hood over his head. Instantly, he became almost too bright to look at. Cress had to shield her eyes. Is it real?
Unfortunately not. I keep daydreaming about it, which is probably how it ended up appearing in this dream. If only I could take it back with me when I wake up.
Why? Are you afraid of the dark?
Not the dark exactly. More the,
Hey, put that away. You'll blind the books.
Bren looked over at the library's front desk where his boss was sitting, pointing a finger at him.
aren't you supposed to be telling us we're being too noisy, not too bright? And what about the fact that I'm drinking coffee in the library?
He pointed across the table at the takeaway coffee cup with the words, "A magical brew," printed on the side. And then he vanished before he could properly explain the reason for the daylight cloak. Did you remember? Cress asked Bren the moment she stepped into his dream. She'd been waiting ages for him to fall asleep, stepping into one boring dream after the next, always thinking of Bren and never finding him until... There he was in the middle of a fairground, a Ferris wheel turning behind him. The air was filled with carnival music, laughter, and the burnt sugar scent of cotton candy.
Cress, good evening. And, remember what exactly?
Cress sighed and turned her gaze toward the moonless night sky. You forgot again. For like the 475th time.
Surely not. I don't think I've known you a whole year yet.
Really? It feels like multiple years.
True. It does. In a good way, that is. Anyway, what is it I'm supposed to remember?
Vale City and Apollo's apothecary. You're supposed to find my grandmother there. She never made any more dream-traveling potion after the one she gave me because it was an old experimental one she was never planning to get approval for, and she couldn't find her notes on exactly how she'd made it. You're supposed to find her and tell her how you made yours so she can travel into my dreams, and I can have real conversations with her. She's probably the only one who can come up with something that'll get me out of this enchanted sleep.
I'm sorry. That's a lot to remember. Perhaps it's just me and my silly, cluttered mind, but the details of my dreams fade as soon as I wake up.
Cress smiled, feeling something melt inside her. You don't have a silly, cluttered mind. Your mind is brilliant. I think most people have trouble remembering dream worlds once they've left them.
I suppose. Anyway, whether you can have proper dream conversations with your grandmother or not, I'm sure she's hard at work trying to figure out how to wake you up.
You're right. I'm sure she is. Bren looked over his shoulder at the slowly turning Ferris wheel.
I was at the Belgravia Fair this evening.
That must have been fun. Though she tried to sound positive, it was difficult to hide the wistful tone in her voice. She'd been to the fair with her friends last year. They'd ridden the bumper cars, and she'd laughed so hard her stomach ached by the end of the evening.
Well, yes and no. I rode the Ferris wheel with a friend, and the view from the top was splendid.
A friend? Cress wondered, an unexpected flash of jealousy warming her insides.
But I couldn't help thinking that it would have been more fun if I'd been there with you.
Oh. The heat of jealousy morphed into the heat of something else.
I figured if I could get myself to dream about it, then we could go together. What do you think? Want to ride the Ferris wheel with me?
Cress reached for his hand. There's nothing I'd like more.
Brewing coffee in there?
Bren pointed at the cauldron that stood between him and Cress. It's a potion that will make us all the same. They were sitting together on the grass outside the library Bren worked at. This was Cress's dream, not Bren's, but she'd seen the grand library entrance with its stone pillars and impressive archway so many times now that it had become a regular feature of her own dreams, even when Bren wasn't around. Which means that, like most other things we create in our dreams, it will never exist in real life.
Why would we all want to be the same? Life would be so boring.
I mean the same... high race? Cress spoke carefully, staring at the cauldron of purple liquid. So there would be no difference between Fae, Shifter, Vampire, and Human. No reason for people to hate one another. Bren was quiet for a while before answering.
That would be nice. It would also be nice if we didn't enslave one of our 4 high races.
Cress's gaze shot up. She wished she could see Bren's expression. I agree 1,000%. The slave charm should never have been created.
What would be even nicer still is if we could keep the differences between high races, but remove the hate.
You're right. This should be a potion that removes hate from the world. She became quiet again, slowly stirring her make-believe potion and leaving space for Bren to ask the one question that would be natural for someone to ask right now. Which high race do you belong to? The two of them had spoken about everything under the sun, but they'd never spoken about this. Not being able to see Bren properly meant Cress couldn't tell just by looking. She wondered what his reason was for not asking her. Or had the question simply never crossed his mind because he assumed they were the same? It seemed likely he was also Fae, given his ability to work with charms and potions. But she knew shifters and vampires brewed certain concoctions as well. It wasn't nearly as easy for them to send their magic into such things, but it was possible. Cress's own reasons for never asking were simple. First, it didn't matter to her whether or not they were the same. Second, she was worried it would matter to him.
Try adding unicorn tears.
Relief filled Cress as Bren moved on from the topic of high races, very obviously not asking her which one she was. Perhaps whatever differences existed between the two of them mattered as little to him as they did to her. Good idea. A tiny glass bottle of Lawson's unicorn tears appeared on the grass beside Cress. Dreams were convenient that way. She added the tears to the cauldron and continued stirring, watching as tiny gold sparkles appeared. What do you think? Should I add anything else?
Of the two of us, my dear Cress, you're the potion master. I don't think my opinion matters much.
Cress's brain almost got stuck on the "my dear Cress" part, but then she focused on the rest of Bren's words. Of course your opinion matters. It doesn't mean mine isn't important. It just means I value yours too.
Is that a line you got from a cheesy love song?
Cress dropped the glass rod and looked up. It was her mother who sat across from her now, not Bren. But after another blink, Mom was gone too.
I need to tell you something.
Bren sat down beside Cress on the bench inside the glass greenhouse above Apollo's apothecary. This wasn't Cress's dream, but since she'd shown Bren the greenhouse and told him it was one of her favorite places, it had begun to appear more often in his dreamscapes.
I don't want to wake up before I've finished explaining, so I'm just going to get on with it, okay?
Okay. Cress's heart beat a little more rapidly. Something brushed her finger. She looked down. Bren's hand was so close to hers on the bench that their fingers were touching. Something fluttered low in the region of Cress's belly. She looked up, and for the first time she could actually see Bren's eyes. The rest of his face remained blurry. But his eyes? Cress felt her chest tighten and her heart leap. His eyes were beautiful. A warm brown that was almost gold. Without realizing it, she was leaning closer. But Bren's eyes, the pupils, Cress froze. the pupils were changing shape, growing narrower, narrower and narrower, until they were impossibly thin and vertical. Orange flames burned around the pupils, threatening to engulf them. Burning orange eyes she recognized.
I'm a shifter.
Cress pushed herself up and backed away. It was you! You're the dragon! Holy stars, you're a dragon! The one in my nightmares always chasing me up the side of the—
No, Cress. I mean, yes, but it wasn't like that. Do you remember I told you something seemed familiar when I first met you? It took me a while, but those old dreams have slowly been coming back to me.
You were part of my nightmare. Cress didn't care that Bren was a shifter. She didn't even care that he was a dragon shifter, which was all but unheard of. The only thing she cared about was that he was that specific dragon who'd chased her through so many nightmares.
No, wait, just listen. I bought a wish, you see. It was silly. I know one can't wish for love, but who would ever naturally fall in love with a dragon shifter? Even among shifter kind, we're looked upon with revulsion or something bordering on reverence, which doesn't help in the romance department.
What does this have to do with being in my nightmare?
Right, sorry, rambling again. So I bought a wish, and I added an extra charm to it, and then I wished for love, and then I started having those dreams. I was in a forest of thorns running after someone I cared deeply for and was desperate not to lose. And every time, right at the end, I realized the reason that person was running from me was because I was in dragon form. But I could never change back before the dream ended. I could never—
His words came to an abrupt end as his body suddenly went ramrod straight. Then his right shoulder dipped down, as if an invisible weight had dropped onto it.
No.
His left shoulder shoved itself forward and his fingers curled into claw shapes.
Not now. Wake up, Bren, wake up.
He fell to the floor and Cress clapped a hand over her mouth as Bren's body arched. He cried out, and then vanished. Cress paced through dream after boring dream, seeing nothing and communicating with no one. Her mind was in turmoil. How could Bren, the gentle, funny, nerdy Bren she had come to know so well, be the dragon who had chased her through nightmare after nightmare as she'd tried repeatedly to get to her window and wake herself up? That dragon was so fierce, so terrifying, while Bren was so— Bren. Cress sat on the edge of a pier and stared out at the rippling water with a frown. That dragon had been terrifying, hadn't it? So much time had passed since she'd been forced to live through the nightmare that she was starting to forget. In fact, now that she thought about it, had the nightmare even happened since she'd met Bren? Perhaps it hadn't, and perhaps the dragon hadn't been so terrifying. Other than appearing to chase her up the side of the building, it had never actually given her a reason to be afraid. She had felt the heat of the flames from its mouth, but it had never once burned her, bitten her, or even scratched her. Perhaps her mind had simply manufactured fear where there had never been a need for it. She wasn't afraid of Bren, and she didn't want to start being afraid of him now. The idea seemed laughable. How could she be afraid of someone she loved? Cress's thoughts slammed to a halt at the startling realization. Her heart pounded, and something hot and heady rushed through her veins. She sat frozen for several breathless moments, then scooted forward. She slid off the edge of the pier and into the water, then dropped straight down into the next stream. Bren, she thought immediately, looking around. In the way that one somehow knows things in a dream, she knew that this was his. But she could barely see a thing here. It was dark, damp, earthy. Water dripped nearby. She turned slowly, feeling wet ground crunch beneath her shoes. Flickering white light caught her attention. She hurried toward it, struggling to figure out what she was seeing. Finally, her brain managed to make sense of the writhing shape ahead of her. Understanding snapped into place. It was a dragon, wrestling with the moon. Bren tumbled and spun and struggled with the glowing white orb. It seemed he was trying to tear it apart with his claws. Cress rushed forward, desperate to help. But if dragon claws were no use against this miniature dream moon, then what could her tiny fey hands do? She looked down and realized she was holding a glass rod, the type of glass rod she might use to stir the contents of a beaker or flask. Odd, but she'd seen stranger things in her dream travels. And if a computer keyboard could fight off a dragon, then by the same illogical dream logic, a glass rod could fight off a moon. Cress ran forward with a cry, raising the glass rod like a dagger. "Bryn, get back!" It was probably surprise, more than the fact that he was obeying her, but the great orange-gold dragon paused, swung around, and pinned Cress with his gaze. She skidded to a halt, her heart lodged in her throat. What had she been thinking? Those fiery eyes were terrifying. No, she forced herself to look closer. Bryn's eyes were burning with fear, not ferocity. The white orb lying at his feet blazed brighter. Bryn roared in pain and tossed his head. He scraped at his sides, leaving deep gashes in his glimmering hide. Cress launched forward and brought the glass rod straight down into the miniature moon. A burst of white light blinded her, and Bryn's roar rang in her ears. Then darkness and silence descended upon them. Cress waited for a new dream to begin, but instead, the faint glow of sunrise illuminated Bryn, no longer in dragon form, lying at Cress's feet. A gleaming puddle of silver, was that what remained of the moon, covered the ground beside him. Bryn stirred and looked up.
Cress.
He pushed himself up, glancing toward the silvery puddle and shivering.
I was in so much pain.
He stood, and Cress noticed his hands shaking.
You saved me. Thank you.
Cress thought back to the nightmare Bryn had rescued her from, the nightmare she hadn't returned to since the day she'd met him. Thank you for saving me first. She stepped closer, reached for his face with both hands, and kissed him. Cress dragged her heavy eyelids open and blinked through her blurry vision. What day was it? Did she have to get up for school now? Hopefully it was a weekend and she could sleep in for a... Her eyelids flew open. Everything came rushing back to her, stealing her breath in an instant like a box of books dropped onto her chest. She sucked in a gasp as she sat up. The curse, the Godmother, eternal slumber. How long had she been asleep? She scrambled off the bed, her mind whirling as her eyes darted wildly about. Everything in the room appeared exactly as she remembered it. The untidy collection of objects on her vanity, the white roses in a vase on her windowsill, the laptop on the corner of her bed. She touched her head, then looked down at her hands, her clothes, her feet. She was wearing the same jeans, the same shoes. Her fingernails weren't grotesquely long, and her hair wasn't down to her knees. Everything was the same. The only thing that had disappeared was the diamond-shaped freckle on her wrist, the mark of the Godmother's curse. If nothing else had changed, was it possible Cress had been asleep for only a few days? She raced out of her bedroom, calling for her parents as she aimed for the kitchen. There was a digital calendar stuck to the refrigerator. The date changed automatically every day, along with... Cress came to an abrupt stop in the kitchen doorway as her eyes landed on the date. She swallowed. 5 years. The Godmother's curse must have frozen everything inside her bedroom, keeping it in exactly the same condition. But now she was awake, which must mean... love. She'd found love. Bryn. Holy stars, she was forgetting everything already. What did he look like? Where did he live? How would she find him? Her pulse drummed wildly as she tried in vain to grab hold of the unraveling threads of her dream world. Think. She squeezed her eyes shut and pressed her fists to her face. A library. Bryn worked at a library. Cress couldn't remember the name, but she knew it wasn't too far away. Several hours, perhaps, and she could see the entrance in her mind. Back in her bedroom, she opened the laptop and searched for libraries nearby. Her eyes scanned the images that came up. Not that one. Not that one. Her fingers scrolled and her eyes darted from picture to picture. Yes! Finally, she spotted a familiar archway with pillars on either side. She leaned closer and squinted at the details below the image. Then she tugged open the left-hand drawer of her vanity, grabbed a transportation charm, and ran for the door. Cress walked beneath the enormous doorway of the grand old library and looked around. Her breath caught at the sight of the elaborately carved wooden shelves, the artwork painted onto the domed ceiling, and the intoxicating scent of old books. She'd seen glimpses of this place inside Bren's dreams, but it was even more beautiful in person. She was just wondering how many aisles she would have to search before finding her true love when her eyes landed on the main desk and a tall, somewhat gangly white guy standing behind it. He was facing away from her, giving her an excellent view of the cauldron-shaped coffee cup on the back of his t-shirt. "A magical brew," read the words beneath the cup. Cress knew without a doubt that it was Bren. He turned toward her, and after years of traveling through dreams together, she finally saw his face. Warm eyes, glasses that gave him a scholarly, intelligent air, and a mouth that, well, hopefully Cress was the only one who could see this, but his mouth definitely wanted to be kissed. He looked up, met her eyes, and smiled. It was the most perfectly glorious thing Cress had ever seen. With her heart thumping wildly and happily, she strode forward and stopped in front of the desk. Bren's smile faltered ever so slightly.
Do I know you?
"You're Bren."
Yes. Wait, Cress?
She reached across the desk, grabbed a fistful of his t-shirt, and kissed him. The library, which had been quiet to begin with, became suddenly noticeably silent. Then someone giggled. Someone else let out a humph of disapproval. Someone else started clapping. Cress didn't care. Neither, apparently, did Bren. His fingers slid into her hair, pulling her as close as the desk between them would allow. A shiver raced from Cress's brilliantly blue hair all the way down to the tips of her toes. Her heart danced in her chest. She would happily have stayed in this moment for the rest of time, but the desk was getting in the way, and there was the annoying fact that she needed to breathe. She removed her lips from Bren's and sucked in a breath. "Thank you for waking me."
Wow. No problem.
He leaned back, adjusted his glasses, then laughed.
Thank you for being real. Everyone keeps doubting my sanity every time I try to tell them about the girl of my dreams.
Cress grinned. "Well, if you said it like that, I don't entirely blame them." Suddenly, she noticed something she'd missed before. The tips of Bren's ears were pointed. "Oh, you're not just a shifter, you're Fae too."
Yes. That's another story I haven't told you yet.
Cress reached for Bren's hand. "I'm looking forward to hearing every story you haven't told me yet."
So it doesn't bother you? The dragon thing?
"Not at all." She gave him a half grin. "I think it's sexy." Bren's face turned adorably red.
You can't say things like that in a library.
"Why not?" Cress leaned closer and whispered, "I think books are sexy too." Bren looked like he'd just won the jackpot.
I'd fall in love with you right now if I didn't love you already.
Cress beamed. Then she climbed onto the desk and kissed him again. Thank you for listening to The Dreamer's Curse. If you enjoyed Cress's story and want to dive deeper into a world where fae, shifters, vampires, and magic are real, and the Godmother rules the illegal wish trade like some Devil Wears Prada mafia queen, I hope you'll check out the rest of Rachel Morgan's City of Wishes series. Happy listening!